Hmm. Okay, so this should be the link to the stream. So check it out and let me know if you can see it. And so let's dive in. Um, let's start. Oh, this is lecture 5. I'm sorry. Okay, I made a mistake, but anyway. Um, so let's start. Let's open a new folder. Oops, a new folder, and let's open a new scene. Okay, and let's see what we want to do here. So before us working with the terrain, we need to say a couple of words about the URP. So you keep hearing that I'm saying URP, Universal Render Pipeline, etc. What is this actually? So basically, how should I put this? So in computer graphics, and this goes for every kind of software, and even for just the rendering on your computers that you're seeing right now. There is something called the graphics rendering pipeline. Anybody heard of this or studied in some class or anything? Okay, no. So basically, graphics and rendering, right, is based on the GPU. Okay, we know that maybe you've heard, CPU and GPU, they have like a different computational architecture in the sense that the CPU is very good at processing one thing at a time in a certain sense, right? Some complex computation or calculation, but almost in a certain sense one at a time. We have, of course, many threads now and virtual threads and all kinds of stuff. While the GPU is very good at processing simple stuff, but thousands or millions at a time, right? So that's why, in a certain sense, the GPU was created so it can compute, graphics, because computing or rendering graphics is basically the process of kind of rendering pixels, a lot of pixels, right? Millions of pixels on screens, and rendering their change. And to do this, we have, of course, different so-called graphics library, like OpenGL is one of the most kind of famous one. And if somebody amongst you want to work in the future as technical artists, you're gonna have to learn this stuff, and you're gonna have to learn a bunch of deep technical stuff about graphics processing and shaders and a bit of math maybe behind that and so on. But in, let's say, in very short terms, the graphics processing, the graphics rendering pipeline is composed of these kind of stages, right? These phases where basically first we are processing the vertices, right? And anything, when we say vertices, you don't have to imagine 3D objects right away, right? Vertices can be also 2D, just based on polygons, right? So we start with the vertices, then we kind of build the polygons. It might be triangles, quads, and so on. And there are some stages in between. So this is very simplified right now, but then we kind of translate these vertices into a two-dimensional plane, and we're going to see this in Unity as well, how this works with the cameras later today. So, and these, they become a so-called fragments. So these are, in a certain sense, the pixels that you see in the screen, right? So this kind of transition from 3D to 2D. And then these fragments are, again, to simplify a little bit, they are colored, right? So we bring some kind of processing color, other effects, right, on top of this plane. And then we merge this and we display it on the screen. So why am I explaining this? Well, because while we have kind of this general rendering pipeline in any software on the computer, right? What we're seeing right now, even if you just open the BIOS, which is, very old school graphics, it's still rendering stuff, right? Based on GPU. Windows has its own implementation of this, and we have Unity or other software that are working on top of Windows, right? And every software that has some kind of, let's say, graphical component like Unity here will have some custom implementation of this rendering pipeline. Not probably not from zero, but still. And this custom implementation of this rendering pipeline in this sense that I just told you, like the stages, and like I said, these are a little bit simplified. Actually, the stages are like, there are tens of stages. I'm looking for a better graphic, but you can get the idea, right? A lot of computations in between. These can go in a slightly different order. So for example, especially when we get to the later stages, when we apply lighting, when we apply post-processing, etc., we have different kind of options. We can first probably, we can in some pipelines or some pipeline versions, we first compute the geometry and then we apply the colors, then we apply the lighting to the colors, to each pixel of the screen and so on. In other versions of this pipeline, we first kind of compute the lighting for the whole scene, then we kind of add post-processing for each pixel and so on. So these are a little bit of details, but why am I saying this? Because Unity has basically three versions of this pipeline, three implementation of this pipeline. And the one that is or was most common up until this point was the so-called built-in rendering pipeline, which was the default when you open any Unity project in basically with this, you see built-in render pipeline. It's gonna go to the default pipeline. Then Unity has something that's called the HD, or it's in its basis. It was introduced, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. It's called the SRP, so the scriptable render pipeline, where people that are, technical artists, studios that had more resources, they could actually create their own, order of this rendering, so they can kind of get a very specific looks, specific aesthetics. And out of this scriptable render pipeline, Unity created two pipelines that we can use today that are kind of alternative. And one of them is the HDRP, so the high definition render pipeline. It's very nice, but it's not kind of oriented toward lower end devices, via mobile VR included, right? So the HDRP has a lot of kind of additional effects like volumetrics, clouds, for all kinds of effects which are kind of included because they're easier to do with this richer and more resource kind of intensive render pipeline. On the other hand, what we're using today is called the URP, so it's the Universal Render Pipeline, and it was created specifically so we can use it with mobile, with VR, with kind of consoles and all kinds of devices that are maybe handheld, and so on. So it's kind of lightweight, and it still can achieve a lot of very good results, but yeah, it uses way less resources. And of course, creating some like volumetric or some kind of more advanced effects with this pipeline is a little bit more difficult. It's not impossible, but just a bit more difficult. So why am I saying all this theory? I'm going to stop talking about theory now. In Unity, how is this translated? So when you go to your project settings, and when you go to the graphics, there is graphics, you can even dock this here. You see here the default render pipeline. And this basically, if you want to change your pipeline later on, or even if you want to try the HDRP, the HD high definition render pipeline, you can go, these are packages basically, you can go to your Unity registry and basically just download them. Okay, so you can write, there is high definition render pipeline, and it comes with a bunch of, oh no, wait, the samples, I think the samples are on the, in the package, like when you start a new project, there is a HDRP sample package, but you can also download them from the asset store. So this is one of the things, and we are, on the other hand, using the universal render pipeline. So just so you know that these are packages, right? You can include them, change them, swap them, so nothing is kind of locked to a specific project. But once you've decided what, like we're using this so we can swap between PC, VR, and so on. Once you've decided what render pipeline you're going to use, we're going to have these assets, right? And these are basically, actually, let's do this right now. So we're not going to use these that are already kind of built in. If you go to your settings folder, let me know if you can see these files here. Can you see these files? Yeah. So are they inside of a project? Oops. Are they inside of this folder project? Okay. So I would say keep them here. So this is going to be, you can maybe rename it to default or something, because this was the default sample kind of assets. And here outside of this folder, let's create let's go to right-click, create menu, and let's find here rendering. And then let's create our URP asset with the universal renderer. So URP asset with universal renderer. And you can, so this name is a little bit long, so I rename it, unless I'm using more than one, but in our case, I don't think we're gonna need more than one. So I'm just gonna rename it to URP asset, and the other one is gonna be the URP asset render or just URP render. Okay, I'm gonna explain what this means in a second. So basically we have these two assets here which define the graphics options, the graphics quality and so on for our entire project, okay? Because these are the assets that represent the specific render pipeline, so the specific kind of order of rendering that we are using right now in Unity, yeah. Okay, and so once we've created these two assets, let's swap them here. So we have two windows, two places that we need to swap these. So this one here was using the default. It has some presets, but we're going to create our own. So just come here to the graphics, and inside of this field default render pipeline, just put our newly created URP asset. Okay. So this is one of the things to do. If you open your URP asset, you're going to see that you have a bunch of options. I'm going to explain in a second some of them. But the most important thing about the URP asset is that it contains a renderer. And so this is, I mean, it can be a little bit confusing because there are a lot of windows, a lot of files and options. Just remember that they have kind of the global options for the rendering, for the graphics, have been split in these two type of assets. They could have put it in one, but it's just too many options and it's more useful this way. So basically the URP global settings are going to contain a renderer file, and that's mainly done because we can have more renderers. So we can have more renderers because the renderers can contain some specific effects. For example, if you come here on the bottom of this, on selecting the renderer asset on the bottom, you have this add renderer feature. And you can have here, you can see here that we have a bunch of different features. For example, let's enable the decal feature. I'll show it to you in a second. Enable this feature, for example. For now, I think we're not gonna, do we have ambient occlusion, screen space? Yeah, okay, let's enable maybe also this screen space ambient occlusion. This kind of also nice to have. So, makes the shadows a little bit better. And so what have we done here? Well, we have added basically two options that are gonna be enabled for our whole project. So for every scene. And you get the idea why we might want to have multiple renders. So for example, let's say that this first, don't do this, I'm just showing you the idea. So let's say that this one would be, what did we enable? Decal plus ambient occlusion, right? But maybe I want to create another render where I don't have these two, I don't want these two kind of effects, right, that are globally available. I want something else like a volumetric fog or something. And so if I have multiple renders, I can just add them here like this. And I can swap between them, right? I can swap settings. Maybe I have one scene where it's like underwater, so I need some specific fog and specific decal. Or maybe I have like 5 scenes that are underwater. So for these 5 scenes, I'm gonna, so maybe, because for just one scene, maybe it's not important. But for 5 scenes, okay, I'm gonna have my underwater render. Then I'm gonna have my volcanic level render, whatever. You get the idea, right? And so this is very nice also to create custom effects. I'm gonna maybe show you some custom effects for these renders. Anyway, so this is basically, oh yeah, and one final thing. I said we have 2 windows to manage the graphics. One of them is the graphics window, and the other one is the quality. And what is a quality window? Is basically precisely here we can use the different renders, because the different renders can be mapped to different quality levels, right? And that's where we come up with the quality settings in games like low, medium, etc. Simply because we have this kind of render global preset graphics configuration files where we can say, oh, listen, in the low quality, I don't want to have fog, I don't want to have post-processing, right? I don't maybe even want to have shadows. And so I'm going to create for myself here one, don't do it, I'm just showing you this. We don't care about this now, but just, so this is going to be low quality, and in the medium quality, we're going to have on the other side enabled maybe just post-processing. So you get the idea, right? We can enable and disable stuff. And then, oh, wait, this was not the, it was the URP. Oh, yeah, actually, this was the useless one. And so you get the idea. We can assign, once we have these multiple renders, we can assign them to the graphics level, and then we can swap them also programmatically. So for now, let's keep, we can even delete these ones, but maybe later or towards the end of the course, we can get back to this. But let's, for now, let's just use the ultra settings. So just double click the ultra and then enable, and then just drag and drop the URP. I'm sorry, the, oh, there it is. The URP asset that we just created here, just added to these pipeline settings. Okay. And that's about it. So if you have any problems with the graphics, keep in mind that you can look in these places, right? You can look in the graphics window, you can look in the quality window, and then you can look in your URP asset and renders. Now that we have set up this, let me see if we need to enable or disable some of these things for our use case. Oh yeah, here, for example, in the graphics options, you have some kind of default settings for the post-processing effects you can assign, like to, so they're, when you create a profile, they're always on. But yeah, I think we don't need to change anything here. In the quality settings, we're also pretty good. And then finally, in the URP settings, URP asset that we just created, please go on and enable these initial settings, the depth texture and opaque texture. These are going to help us with some of the effects. The HDR is nice to have, like it's always adds a little bit of flavor. And also we have HDR colors, which have intensity and a bunch of additional options. The anti-aliasing, we might go to maybe just a little bit here. I think we can support this. And yeah, oh yeah. And for the reflection probes, let's enable the probe blending and box projection, and we should be done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's it. And so this is basically the idea of, we're going to see it in action, but a little bit of theory about the rendering pipeline, and then how it's implemented in Unity. Now let's go back to our scene and let's start building our terrain, and we're going to see some of these options soon enough. So in our empty scene, let me first show you kind of the default package, and then I'm going to have you download kind of an additional terrain package. So how does the terrain in Unity work? Basically, if you go to the 3D object and then terrain, and let's create this terrain plane. Just checking the mic. Yeah, it's working. Okay. Okay, so we have this terrain tile base. It's called a tile. And we have here a special component, that's a terrain component, that will allow us to kind of sculpt, paint, add trees and details and all kinds of stuff to our terrain tile. Now, this terrain system is created with the possibility of creating kind of large open world. So that's why the first button that you're going to see here on the right inside of the component is going to be this kind of terrain tile, multi, whatever creation tool. Because you might want to create some kind of, I don't know, different biomes or different areas in your level. But since we're not gonna go, maybe next year, this year we're not gonna create like really big levels. I think that just working with a single tile should be okay for you. So this first two here, probably when we're not gonna use it basically. So the second thing here is, before sculpting or doing anything else, is to know that the terrain has a bunch of options. And it's basically the last tab that you can see here. Skip these initial ones for now, the tree in detail we're gonna see, the wind setting and so on. Mesh resolution. So this is the first thing that you have to decide when you create your terrain tile. How big should it actually be? And I would suggest to always kind of use something for scale. Like you can even just drop inside a cube somewhere, hopefully in the middle. Just drop a cube inside, maybe even 2 cubes, just to, so you know this is 2 meters, okay? In the real world, this should be equivalent to 2 meters. And then you can check out how big this actually is. Okay, it's pretty big, right? This might be like a proper game level for a small game. So we might not want to use such a big terrain because it's going to be difficult to paint and sculpt and so on. So what I would suggest is to go to the options here, find the mesh resolution, and just decrease it to something more manageable, like 200 by 200. And then you have the terrain height, which is basically how high can the geometry go. But this as well can be, I don't know, you can increase this later if you need. But so we're creating kind of a smaller terrain. And then something that I personally always do just to make things a bit easier is that if you select your terrain tile and you select the pivot, where is the pivot, right? It's going to be here. So if you, for example, select these cubes here were not reset, but the start, or the center of the world space, the game world, would be here on the edge of the terrain. This is not ideal if we are using a single tile. So what I would suggest to do is to just grab the terrain and move it to the center. How can we do this? Well, just remember that it's always kind of minus half of its length, right? Or to be precise, on the Higgs is going to be half of its, Higgs value, whatever, and then on the Z it's going to be minus half of its Z value. So if our terrain is 200 by 200, just place it minus 100 and minus 100 on the Z, and then it's going to be centered. All right. And then what can we do with this terrain? Is this clear so far? Okay, we just created the tile, decreased the resolution, and moved it to the center. Now, we can do 3 things with the terrain, and these are also basically the 3 stages when you're creating a kind of a environment. Is, the shape, general shape, the paint or the texture of the terrain, and then populating this terrain with trees or grass or rocks or some kind of other type of detail. So let's start with the first one. The first one will be, you can find it either in this second tab of the component, or more conveniently, since this version of Unity, they have also added a kind of a widget here, which is nice. So I would suggest maybe to use this widget, but also remember that some of the options are not going to be in the widget. Okay, in widget is just selecting the tools. So the first tool here would be the so-called raise or lower terrain. And what it basically does, like you can see right away, it will raise or sculpt the terrain. And just pressing on the terrain, it modifies it. Or while if you hold the control key, it will bring it down. Okay. So the control key will bring it down. Now, this raise or lower terrain tool specifically, and there are a lot, we're going to see some of the others one as well. But they basically all work in the same way. They have some brush just basically like, I don't know, if you've used brushes in Photoshop or many other programs have them there, they might be just some solid color with a circle, or a little bit of feathered circle, or some noise texture and so on. And I'm gonna give you also some cooler brushes as well. But they're still like simple textures that you can use to do something. So in this case, it's paint geometry. And all the brushes basically have the brush strand. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm sorry. Because I have now the plugin installed, but I'm gonna have you install it in a second. So for you, it's gonna be slightly different, but all of these brushes will have the brush strength and the brush size basically, right? So you can define um, how much displacement and how the area of the brush basically, right? So if you want to cancel something, I think for you it's going to be shift. For me it's control, and soon we're going to install this additional package here. You can delete everything with a just high brush strength and clearing up this. So now I'm going to leave you a little bit of time to play around with this. What you can try to do is maybe take some reference, and I don't know if you can even try to take this reference or some other similar reference and try to maybe create around our player a little bit of natural terrain. And probably with these brushes, it's not going to be super nice from the first try, but you see that later I'm going to give you some other brushes which are much better to create natural looking shapes. But just try it out for now. Just this, creating the geometry and then maybe reducing it. Oh, and I'm just gonna show you one more thing. If you want this, so the raise or lower terrain here that we're using is the basic tool, and then we also have this smooth height tool, which if you've created some geometry and then you just want to kind of smooth it out, smooth the edges, basically, you can use this one. So try both of these tools. So let me know if it's working for you or if you have any other question additionally for all the things up until now. So I think that okay, so is this working for you? Is this clear how it works? Okay, great. So let's add a couple of things to this. So actually, let's download now this package. So if you go to this to the package manager, Unity registry, and then you go to the terrain tools. Yeah, please download this asset. And at home, if you wish, you can also check out these samples here. Maybe I would suggest to if you want to try them in kind of in a new project, simply because they're very big. And I've taken some assets from these samples so we can use them, some trees and brushes and so on. So I'm going to give them to you individually, but if you want to try them at home, you can definitely do so. And once the terrain tools are downloaded, please let me know. And I'll also upload here. Terrain palette. I'm gonna upload here a couple of things. Okay, so do you have this package downloaded and imported? Yeah. So now if you open again the same component, the terrain, and then the terrain component here in the inspector, you should see that we have a couple more options, right? On one hand, we actually have more tools, a bunch of more tools. And then we also have more options on our brush settings and so on. So one of the nice additions with this terrain toolbox is that we can actually rotate the brushes. So if you want, you can kind of select one brush, maybe one of them with a noise, and then stamp a little bit, then rotate and stamp and so on. So this is, remember that this is an option because it's quite useful especially when you have some kind of more rigid forms or stumps and so on. And here, if you need the brush in this terrain toolbox, we can actually also um, define the size, for example. So if you need a bigger size, you can just open this arrow here and just write that the max of this brush is going to be 1,000. And now you have a extremely big brush. Okay, it's too much, but you get the idea. Usually, it shouldn't be bigger than the size of your terrain. So, but it is possible. And then we have a couple more options like the brush spacing and scatter means that you're basically gonna press on one side and it's gonna kind of stamp the brush shape on either on a different place for whatever reason, maybe to create some kind of randomized effects, or if you have the scatter. Wait, if you have the scatter, it should even do multiple stamps. But usually, like personally, I almost never use these. So, yeah. Okay, and so try to work a little bit more on this terrain, and let's see a couple of other tools that we have here. But can you see now on the left side this? Yeah, okay, this widget. So basically, a couple of things we can do with these new tools are, for example, one of the more fun one is this terrace tool. So it's in the first, sorry, in the second group here, terrace. And then basically you can, if you have a higher strength, you can create this terrace-like geometry, which is not bad actually. So if you have you want this kind of Central Asia type of look, this can be done with these two. And then we have some other, you can explore them at your own leisure as well. The ones that we're going to use the most are set height, stump terrain, and probably just the smoothing height or one of the erosion. So I'm just going to show you these erosion tools, and then later we're going to see the other ones. So the erosion, how it works, it's some kind of a smoothing effect, right? But the difference is that it's smoothing based on some kind of noise texture. So for example, we have three types of erosion: hydraulic, thermal, wind. So if you want, for example, if this is some kind of a valley, right? And I want to say that the wind always comes through here because this is like the open space. I can select my wind erosion brush or tool, then use the rotation to kind of determine where the wind is coming from, and then just go over the terrain a little bit, and you see that it will basically smooth the front face of the geometry and maybe make the back face a little bit more evident. But yeah, it's just a kind of a smoothing tool, but it's nice if you want this type of detail. Also for if you have a river or something like this, you can use this hydraulic erosion, which should be kind of a concave, right, creating this river-like shapes and so on. So try these tools just a couple minutes more, and then we're going to move on. Okay. So is it clear how this works? Yeah, it's working. So now let's try to, I think let's say for this first exercise, I think we're gonna try to recreate this, like I said, some configuration like this, rocky terrain, and then, emissive shapes, just to also kind of go over some of the environment effects again. And so I would say here, I'm going to leave you a little bit of time later also to touch up stuff. But so the second step, we said the first step is shaping. The second step here would be the texturing, right? So in order to give our terrain some kind of color, what we have to do is we have to select the terrain, go to paint texture, or just select this second tool here on the left. And here we can add a bunch of textures inside of layers and paint the terrain. So let's see how this works. If you scroll down beyond the brushes and then the brush settings, you have these layers section, right? And here inside of these layers, we can create our own layers to to add color. So let's start with something I would call just dark. So this is going to be our foundation or our base layer. And when you press create on the layer, what it creates basically is a material. So it's kind of a internal material for specific for the terrain. And I think inside of try to look if you have something dark, like almost monochrome dark texture, something like this. I don't know if you can find inside of your project something that is, you can use either this one. Let me see what I have here. It can be also one of these metallic textures. I think we downloaded a bunch of them last time. And these are not like, they're not oriented toward being an albedo, right, an actual texture, but we can use them here because we want to create this monochrome type dark look. It can be also gray, I guess, but so for this purpose, you can use also any other type of single color texture, basically. Right, and now that we have this, let's add, I would say maybe one more, just so we don't have, like maybe we have two color type of situation. So I would try to find some texture that's a bit more grayish, so a little lighter. So I think this one might be okay, something like this. So can you find in your project some textures that have these properties? Do you have them? You can find, because I'm sorry, I don't remember if I've imported. I don't think I've imported these because they're probably some of the samples. So, but I think you should definitely have at least one metallic texture and maybe one height map that you can use for these layers. So let me know if you can find something suitable. Okay, and if you have found at least one or ideally two of these textures, kind of monochrome, let me say a couple more things. How do they work? Basically, on one hand, we have the base material for the terrain, right? Which is, in this case, is kind of a special default material. But the layers on top of the terrain material are materials by themselves. So you can basically just select one of these layers, And if you want to, add some stuff like normal maps and the mask is kind of rarely used, but anyway, you can definitely do this. And what is more, here from the channel values, you can also manipulate the metallic or ambient occlusion and oops. So if you don't want this to be like actual metal, you can just select the layer, go to its layer properties, channel default, and just decrease the metalness. And there is also one nice feature here, which is, given that this is geometry is, of course, has kind of built-in understanding of height, right? Because it's still a three-dimensional kind of geometry, even if we can manipulate it. One thing that we can do is we can select the height. You can see here for this other material. And if you select, for example, let's see if we can do this. Oops. Okay, no, maybe in this version. Just a second. So, this and then. Nope, it doesn't. No, anyway, okay, I'm gonna show you this with a special shader because this kind of height-based or rule-based application of texture is kind of nice, but it doesn't work here out of the box, unfortunately. Probably they've remove this feature. Anyway, so yeah, don't mind the height. You can play around a little bit with the shadows with ambient occlusion, but mostly what you can do is you can basically select one, or if you have more of the other textures, and just paint on top of your base texture, right? This is kind of the main application of this palette here with multiple layers. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just selecting the other texture and I'm painting on top of the other. And here specifically what I want to do is maybe I want to, it doesn't make much sense, right? We're trying to do some kind of abstract environment, but we might approximate, I think, something that is snow, I guess. I don't know. This shouldn't be super realistic, or we can, but this is just to exercise the muscle. And what happens here under the hood is basically it creates kind of a mask. I don't know if you work with the Photoshop, you know how you can mask stuff and then do something with this with a mask, like add cover or remove cover, whatever. And it's the same thing here. In this case, it's called a splat map. And so that's basically the, let's say, the two steps. And now in the next exercise, we're going to see how to actually do the actual materials and rocks and so on. But for now, let's try to quickly finish this with just going over some of the techniques that we saw last time. And what we're trying to achieve here is something like this, right? Some look like mixing rock and geometry. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take these cubes. I think I'm gonna make them a little bit larger. Is this working for everybody? I mean, the cover, how do you get the materials? So when you go to the terrain, select the paint texture, and then on the layers, you can simply create a layer, which is kind of a submaterial, and then select some dark texture, if you can find it here. So creating the layer. Sorry, come again? Just try to look here in your, let me, I'm sorry, come again? How do I get to the page start? It's on the terrain, and then from the tools, or here on the left, you can just select this paint texture, or easier probably is going to be on the widget here on the left. Just select the second button. Yeah. And then once you've added the layers, you can just paint around. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of try to build a composition, and you can try to follow or build your own. And basically, what I want to do is, in this case, follow, and I'm uploading a bunch of stuff for later, is follow this this environment structure that I gave you, right? So you can, wait, maybe I can just paste it in Discord if you have it for a reference. Oops, come on. And so we might not use all the layers here, but I think it's a good idea to start kind of following this pattern, right? So the first thing that I'm gonna add here, and I usually use this type of separators. We can do it like this. The first thing that I want to kind of position here is the camera, right? Because the camera here is weird. So I guess I'm gonna just rotate it somewhere here. So on the other side, and something like this, okay? Then we're gonna have the environment, and I'm gonna put this in a layer. And or just and what do we mean by this is basically all the background or the static objects, right? Like the terrain is going to be part of the environment and so on. Then we might have something like atmosphere, which can be all the kind of weather effects, day night cycles, and going forward we're going to add a bunch of this stuff. For now, not a lot is going on here, but and then we might have something like lighting. Okay, and here is going to be our light. And for now, I guess these cubes can be inside of our environment. So what I'm going to do here is, I think first I'm going to set up the actual environment effects. Just let me make sure that this terrain can I do this? Okay, yeah, anyway. And so do we remember how to make the world dark? I think we saw this last time, right? What I should like configure 3 things to make the world dark. The first one, yeah, okay. And to do the skybox, what do I need here? Sorry, come again. Oh, okay. So yeah, but in this case we're gonna see right away that we have the default material. So first of all, I need to create a skybox material so we can come on. So I can edit the material. So let's do it here. Skybox, and this will be the procedural. If you create one material once, you can just duplicate it later. But in this case, I guess I'm gonna create it every time. Anyway, so it's the same skybox procedural shader. And here, what I want to do is I want to decrease the exposure. Basically, all the options for now. Let's turn them down. Okay. Then we have the environment settings, right, from the lighting environment tab, which are mostly the environment lighting and the reflections, which are given by the metallic materials and so on. So here, and then finally we have the the global light, right? So now we are completely in the dark. So this maybe not, we don't have to do it like to be completely in the dark. So maybe let's make the light kind of shine a little bit, and then I guess this multiplier can be 0.2 or something. Okay. And then what I want to do here is I want to make this cube emissive, right? So do we remember how to create these emissive materials? Okay. Yeah. So this is going to be the emissive one. So I'm basically swapping the material of this cube from the default with a custom material, right? And we know that we have our default material, which is the lit. In this case, it's called URP lit material. And here we have this emission checkbox, right? So I guess let's do something like this. So I created a custom material, just right click, create material. You can just drag and drop it on the cube or any other object, not the terrain. And then from this emissive material, just come here and enable emission and make the color something that you like. If we want to stick with the reference, it's going to be white. And the good thing about using the HDR, which is kind of an additional bump, if you remember from our URP asset settings, here we enabled the HDR, or probably it was enabled by default. So a nice thing about the HDR is that it gives us these colors that have a bunch of widgets, for example, for the nuances, or just we can increase the intensity if it's an emissive kind of color. So, and this is especially visible with the post-processing. But anyway, yeah, tell me. What do that you mean on the cube? On the inspection. Oh, here. No, it's window. And then where is it? Rendering and then lighting. And then I just dock it here. Just bring it up. Yeah, I'm keeping these things kind of docked because we're gonna, like this one, not yet, but package manager, it's here. Project settings are here because we're gonna open this stuff often enough. So. All right, and so now that we have our kind of emissive cubes, it still doesn't look very nice, but let's try to maybe kind of position them. And here I'm going to leave you a little bit of time, or maybe let's finish adding the post-processing, and then I'm going to leave you a bit of time. But you can definitely kind of decide how you want to compose or intersect basically these shapes with your environment. Yeah. Oh yeah, the sky. So basically you need to create a material. So create just a normal material. And then here I named it skybox. And then when you select the material, from the shader window on the top, we're going to swap to a skybox shader. It's called procedural. And then when you have this, you can just drag and drop this material on the sky. Or if this doesn't work, sometimes it doesn't work, you should go to environment and just place it here, skybox material. That's your reference. Yeah. Yes. And then apply it to the sky, either by drag and dropping. Yeah, and then inside of this, you can just like I did here, I just brought everything down if you want to make it dark. But you can then play around a little bit with the settings, right? So it depends on what you want to do. So. Okay, and we are almost done. I think 10 minutes, and I'm gonna let you. We're gonna have a break, but let's finish this first. Okay, and just a couple more things. Now I'll let you finish this. So what we're missing just I think two, maybe three things tops. So one of them is if you want to position your sun, remember that the sun is linked to the direction of light in this shader, right? So if you select your direction of light and kind of move it around, you should see the sun also moves. If it doesn't move, same as a shader, please come here in the lighting and just add it to your sun source, because maybe sometimes it doesn't kind of automatically take the reference. So just assign it to your sun source, and then maybe again watching my kind of composition or the camera shot that I'm creating, I'm gonna do something like this, I guess. You can move it around a little bit. So some kind of dark sunset, whatever. And here you can play around a little bit with the shader values. Okay, maybe you have to, the sun size shouldn't be at 0. You're not gonna see it. Okay, so maybe make this a bit bigger and okay, this is very obvious. So this is the sun setting. Is it is clear for everybody how this works? Yeah, okay. And then I would suggest also to enable a little bit of fog. Just, but okay, this is too much, but just a touch of fog. You can even give it like if you don't want to make this like black and white, but give it maybe some kind of shade. Like I think I've decided to do this in red. So I guess you can make your fog here red as well. And then the final thing, if you've also enabled the fog, would be to add our post-processing effects. And can you do you remember how what are the steps to add the post-processing? Yeah, so we need volume and then global volume. And you can rename these to post-processing or post-volume so you can remember. Because later we're going to use some other volumes as well. So the global volume, then on the camera, we need the post-processing flag here enabled, right? So on the main camera, because this is kind of something that's applied to the camera. And then inside of the volume, we need to select the profile. So I guess we can select one of the profiles that are either existing, or you can also create your own profile and or even just if you want to, like, if you like some of the existing, like for example, last time we created this profile, I can assign it to the volume, select it. So pressing here, select it, and then just duplicate it, give it some other name like lecture 5 profile, and then change it a little bit if I don't want to lose the what I did last time, right? So I created this duplicate of the profile from last time, move it to the other folder if you want, and then reapply this here. And now I guess I can, what did we use last time? We used the vignette. Bloom with some red color. Okay, this is too much. Okay. And then, yeah, I don't know, depth of field. Okay, yeah, something like this. So now it's a bit nicer like this. And of course, you can use more objects than one. You can kind of rotate and integrate them. They can be scattered. Yep. So I'm just gonna leave you like 5 minutes to or 3 to 5 minutes to finish this, and then we're gonna have a break. Yeah. How do you which one? Glowing. Yeah. So you mean the cube or the post processing, or both of them? So first of all, on the cube, I added this new material. So just creating a new. You did, okay. And then you need to add this post processing effect with the bloom, right? So let's see the steps again. So first of all, on the camera, you need to enable the post processing. Then you need to right click and then where is it? Volume, and then global volume. And then inside of the global volume, you can assign. So if you click here on the circle, you're going to see a bunch of profiles that are already existing. If you want, you can just click new and then build your own profile. And for this profile, I've just added, let me check. Oh yeah, that's nice. So I've added here vignette, which this is just to make the visual field a bit narrow. Bloom with these options. Tone mapping is just kind of overlay, bit of depth of field, and then wait, these color, yeah, no, these color curves, I'm not using them, so actually, yeah. Yep. Okay, let me check. So, oh yeah. So let's see here. Oh yeah, it's not enabled in the one. So seconds. So I have to just create stick with the new one to the right. No, yes. And inside of this, you know, like you see, like there's a people that know over the seconds. Let's see. But reading instead of like so let's see if it's so it's actually oh no, for the second seconds. So that's why I said like we need to check on this video and this video. Let's see. We can use it on these layers. If you look at it, so we know everything. Yeah, so remember what I said about the emission inside of the material. If you're creating an emissive material, you can go inside of the material and then also make this more intense, like the intensity of the emission can be. And this is kind of almost kind of useful for bloom and post-processing, because if you're not using post-processing, you're not going to kind of notice this very much, but still. Yeah. Yeah. Not working? Yeah. Let me see. So, let me just give you the steps one more time if it's not working for you. So please check, first of all, if you've created this custom URP asset, right? And URP asset with the renderer, so it's create, rendering, and this one here. And so this custom URP asset, we are going to assign it both to the graphics window here inside and the quality window, selecting the ultra, and there it is. And once it is assigned, you have to go to the URP renderer and enable, it should be enabled, but just check if it's enabled, the post-processing from here. And if this is not working, check the camera, and then if it's still not working, I'm going to come and check what's going on.
Well, I don't know what the understand that this is actually differential. So like once you do instead of going days, you don't exactly know what to do. You just remember that sometimes you might need to take it so it's rare. For the exam, which would be at the end of February, ideally. In the middle of it, I'm going to ask if we do it at the end of February. See if I will get it. So, any questions? Any other questions? No? Okay. So, if you're done with this so far, is there one question for you? Right. So, when this is done, I guess we can take 15, and then we're gonna do another exercise.